Hey gang, my name is Greg Koval, and I'm the head instructor of Koval Taekwondo. Today, what I want to talk about is creating a dialogue where we can start dealing with this long-time issue of inappropriate sexual activity and grooming behaviors that's been going on in martial arts. This video is partially designed for parents so that you can start being more involved and more educated about how this can occur so easily within martial arts. But it's also designed for students themselves and for us as instructors to try to make sure that we protect ourselves and never do anything that could be seen as inappropriate. So, that being said, I want to start by expressing why this happens. In martial arts, we're going to talk about the stages of grooming behaviors in a second. But what I want you to realize is that a lot of these grooming behaviors are very closely knitted with this culture that we've created within martial arts. And why we've kind of given them a platform that's easy to go into this kind of grooming behavior. And this is why it happens so much. Now, what grooming behavior is, for those of you who don't know, is it's slowly and gradually over time gaining the trust of an individual who is a victim to create an inappropriate sexual relationship. What's happening is that because of the martial arts culture, it's just too easy for these guys to do this stuff. And then we're always shocked afterwards and we go, what, how did this happen? We shake our fingers at them and we look at them as a bad guy, but we're not doing anything about it. And we need to start having conversations and start having dialogues about it. So that being said, let's start talking about the different stages, and I'll kind of express why this stuff occurs and like the correlation with martial arts. First of all, the first thing in the first stage is that somebody who's engaging in grooming behavior, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to try to identify a victim. They're going to cast a net and they're going to try to figure out who is vulnerable, who is somebody that fits what they're looking for. And the thing that you got to realize is that in martial arts, we already kind of cater to vulnerable people a lot anyways. Not everybody, but a lot of schools do a lot of anti-bullying. We do a lot of women's self-defense. Our target market can sometimes be people who are feeling vulnerable. So that's already a big red flag where you're like, well, you're drawing these people in. Also, a lot of martial arts classes, I don't have much of a kids program because I don't want it, but most martial arts schools make their bones on kids classes. That's a big concern, right? Like, you're talking about a large student base that's essentially the target market for not just us as martial artists, but also for them as somebody who's going to violate that trust. The next thing that they're going to do, the second stage, is they're going to gain trust and access. We're already in a position where we are leaders. In fact, one of the things I've really done a lot for myself is to knock myself down off that pedestal. I came up through a program where my grandmaster, man, like, he was idolized, and with good reason. He's an amazing individual, but if you look at like a lot of the old school traditional martial arts, like the head instructor, the master who ran the school, it was a hero worship thing, right? And we really idolized that person who ran the school. And so it's very easy for them to create the trust because they're giving you these huge knowledge bombs on your martial arts game, and they're giving you all these life skills, this good stuff. And all of a sudden it translates very easily into a personal life where it can transition, and all of a sudden this person becomes immortalized in your mind as something more than what they actually are. So I personally try to knock myself down off that pedestal, and this is part of the reason I do it. Also for humility. I mean, I'm just a guy. I want my students to know I'm just a guy. I don't want them to see me as infallible. But what happens is then they start using that to gain access to this person's life, and start to, get a lot of personal time with them and stuff like that. And this is where you go into the third stage where they become independently important to this victim. It's not just, they don't just gain trust. Now they become important. Sometimes this is done through gift giving. Sometimes it's done through rewards. But in martial arts, it's very easy to do because we have promotion tests. These people are seeking belts, right? We have demo teams and sparring team slots that these people are trying to get on. We might have private instructor training. We might have secret knowledge that we don't want to share with everybody except our most trusted students. This secret ninja bullshit happens a lot in a lot of traditional martial arts. I'm not a fan of it. I think just share the knowledge. Now, sometimes you have to level stuff off based on where people are at in their training, but this idea of withholding information can sometimes be a thing that I've seen. And so they become very important to this person. They also become a mentor. They start coaching them a lot one on one and start doing a lot of personal time with them to really help their development. And so this person becomes very, very trusted. And what's happening is, like when you talk about kids, the parents trust them because look at this great mentor for my kid. They're such a great role model. Everybody loves this guy. And that's what happens is everybody loves this guy. They're very charismatic a lot of times. They maybe have influenced in a very positive way in other ways where, grades go up for the student. They don't get in as much trouble in school. Maybe they're less socially awkward. Maybe if they have some sort of a developmental issue or like ADHD or something like that, maybe they're having better coping skills for that. And so this person becomes very independently important. The next stage is that then they start creating isolation. They start finding ways to be alone with this person. And this is where you got to be really careful. And you see this a lot in martial arts. One-on-one private training. Oh, I'll give you a ride home after class. Hey, come to my office. Hey, we're going to do this tournament. I'll give you a ride down there. Sharing a room. This type of stuff happens. And this is where it's a huge, huge red flag. If you are the student and your instructor starts doing this stuff, or you have a child in martial arts, this is a big red flag. But it happens a lot. People, when they travel in martial arts, like they do seminars, they stay at somebody's house. Dude, this stuff happens all the time. Like this type of stuff, like it's just become part of the culture. And maybe this is where we can start putting up boundaries and having conversations about that. But the next thing is then you start having secrecy tests. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do trust checks and secrecy checks. And they'll kind of try to get somebody to do something that maybe they don't feel comfortable with. And then they hold it against them. And they kind of make that like, you don't want anybody to find out. Or you can't share this with anybody because think about what it'll do to the school. Think about what it'll do to you. And so they start testing the waters with that slowly, with secrecy. And trying to see how much can they keep something to themselves. How much can I gain this person's trust? How much can I push the boundaries of what they're comfortable with? And then they start getting into the sixth stage, which is desensitizing sexuality. And this is where things start going downhill real quick. Now, in martial arts, it's tough because we're already very physical with each other anyway. When I do jiu-jitsu, our hands are all over each other, right? So how do you separate that? Like as an instructor with my Taekwondo program, I frequently have to help people make adjustments, maybe adjust a foot position, stuff like that. The thing is, we have to be very careful about establishing what is an appropriate touch within the realm of martial arts. And maybe this is something as a community we need to start being clearer on. For example, if I am training with a female student in jiu-jitsu, if I go to break a guard, I got to be careful where I put my hands. Like, it's as simple as that. Maybe there's certain techniques that I should reconsider when and if I use those with a student, whether it's a child or a female. But like I said, this happens not just to women and children. It does happen to adult men as well. So we need to remove some of the stigma from that as well and say this is something that can happen to anyone, and we need to be aware of it. And this is what this conversation is about. Finally, they start trying to control the relationship. This is, at this point, they're in. Like, they've got something on you that you're going to use against you. They've isolated you. They've created they've already pushed the boundaries slowly over time with what is sexuality. Maybe it's changing in the locker room and stuff like that. Whatever it is, it's slowly over time built something where they become comfortable by expanding what their comfort level is in terms of that, and then they start holding things against them so that they don't dare talk about it. And maybe they even feel like there's nothing inappropriate going on a lot of times until there is. So that's the stages. You can see how in martial arts we've set a stage where all this stuff can occur very easily. And this is why I think it happens so often, and this is why I think we need to talk about it. So now I want to talk about recognition a little bit. First of all, there are some things that we can do within martial arts to start recognizing warning signs. For parents in particular, this is something that you're going to want to pay attention to because this is where you're going to start noticing things that are off. Be careful of private conversations. If the instructor is constantly pulling your son or daughter aside to have these one-on-one tutorials or conversations and stuff like that, anytime they're asking for things in isolation, that's a huge red flag. There's no reason for them to ever be alone. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about us as instructors, what we need to do. But there's no reason for them to ever be alone with somebody. That's very dangerous. Keep an eye out for inappropriate relationship building. The way that I look at it is this should be a professional relationship. Yes, you are going to get very close, and this person is going to probably be a huge mentor in your life or in your son or daughter's life. You have to kind of like set a boundary on the realm of what is professional and what is okay within what they're doing and what is going beyond that. They might try to hang out with you, the parent, a bunch too, to get more access to them. So if they're all of a sudden want to come over for dinner and stuff a bunch, that might be a red flag. You know what I'm saying? If they want to have them over to do a one-on-one conversation about something, you might want to go, well, what are we talking about here? Like, start asking some questions about that. Be careful about gifts. Like, start keeping an eye out for if they start doing, like, oh, you won this thing, and like they start giving them things a lot, or even just like these weird, like, sort of constant promotion and gratitude. And this is where in martial arts it's kind of weird, because sometimes a lot of schools do this from a promotional standpoint, because they feel like people who receive things constantly feel like they're more prone to want to stay. It helps with gaining new students. It helps with keeping students. So it's like, when is it about getting students, and when is it about keeping students and growing the school, and when is it something else? And the thing is, none of these individually for these first couple might be inherently bad, but it should at least raise a red flag, and you should start kind of paying an eye. You always have to question the motivations of anything that seems out of the ordinary. Unsupervised time is the biggie. Like, you cannot allow for any unsupervised time. Anytime you see that, that is a huge red flag. And lastly, ask your kid questions. When they have these things that they're doing, like, ask them what took place. Be involved, and that is going to be your first warning sign. And when we start going to prevention here, this is going to tie in very heavily, but being involved is the biggest thing on this when you talk about as a parent. If you're paying a lot of attention, and actually I'll just jump right into prevention here. The best thing you could do is just be involved and pay attention. If you are constantly involved and constantly paying attention to what's going on and asking questions, if that person is looking to victimize your child, this is something that might put them off from that. It usually will be enough to stop it, because if you go, wait, why are you having a one-on-one conversation with my son in your office? What is that conversation about? What does that look like? And then you ask your child about it separately. And they start maybe seeing, like, maybe they were testing the waters, and now they're realizing those waters are too dangerous for me. It could be the same thing for you if your instructor pulls you in the office, and, if it's a professional conversation, like they want to talk to you about billing, they don't want everybody to hear your billing, okay. But if they start asking questions that are maybe a little bit weird, this is a time when you start creating some separation there. Set some boundaries, maybe even change schools. Like, I'll be honest, nobody wants to change schools, but sometimes if there's some weird boundary stuff, that's a time that you definitely need to change schools. Education is a big part of this. We need to educate our children who are involved in martial arts and let them know about what is appropriate and inappropriate touching, what is an appropriate and inappropriate conversation, appropriate and inappropriate questions. We need to share with other parents. We need to share with other students. We need to share with other instructors. As a community, we need to be educated about this, because the risk is so high and it keeps happening. And you know what? It's one of those things where we keep on letting it happen because nobody talks about what we can do about it from the front end. You just got to keep professional boundaries in place for them. If you have an instructor, keep it professional. You can be friendly, just like any other professional. If I'm talking to my doctor, I can be very friendly, and they might even give me some really great advice that's going to influence my life positively. But I'm not inviting them over my house for dinner, and they're not giving my kid a ride home. You know what I'm saying? So keep it professional. Think about it in those terms. Finally, what I want to talk about is us as instructors and what we need to be doing to help prevent this as well. And when you see other instructors not doing this, we need to call them on their bullshit. First of all, like I said, you got to keep it professional, guys. The first thing I'm going to say is don't try to date your students, okay? This is a huge boundary issue. You know, when you talk about like a therapist who dates a client, you're like, oh, that's so bad. Or a teacher who dates a student in a school setting, it's so inappropriate. And we understand why it's inappropriate. But then we don't uphold this with our peers. You absolutely should not try to date your students. I don't care how good looking they are, how funny they are, how cool they are, how much of a connection you have. Don't do it. Like, it's okay to have a boundary. Don't date somebody who is a student because it's already built on the idea of a inappropriate power base where you are coming from a position of authority, and that is never an okay thing to start a relationship on. So I'm going to say it flat out. Don't try to date your students. Don't have inappropriate conversations in the dojo. Now, in the school, sometimes if it's me and a couple buddies, you know, we might talk politics and stuff like that a little bit at class. But like when the kids are there, especially, or if there's female students, it really, even if they're not, it's better to just keep it professional anyway. You know, the older I get, the more I want to keep that stuff off the mat anyway, and just being very careful about where that line is. Now, you're going to joke. Martial arts is a fun community. We're going to joke. So you can't always keep it serious, but and you don't want to anyway. Like, this is about having fun together. But we maybe as martial artists, we need to start deciding as a community, where is that line, and where is the okay place to go to, and where is it not okay to cross? Because we talk about things like politics, like there's a lot of moralizing in martial arts a lot of times, and it's okay. One of the things a lot of schools do offer is discipline and values and stuff like that. That is an okay thing for a lot of schools to teach, but it can lead you into some dangerous waters if you're not careful. You know, it can be a boys' club a lot of times. You're going to have a lot of joking that you got to be careful which direction it goes and how far it goes. Just try to keep it professional. You can keep it fun, but try to, you know, I know it takes some of the fun out of it to say you got to keep on your, you know, best behavior, but this is a business, right? And you got to treat it like a business. And so if you see a school that starts engaging in some behavior that are like, you know, maybe you should call them on it and start questioning that behavior, because it might be all they need to start putting up that red flag and realizing that, yeah, maybe they are going too far. And this will also help with things like hazing and other types of inappropriate behaviors. We need to start questioning each other and saying, you know what, maybe this isn't okay. My rule number one is I never allow myself to be alone with a student. I just don't do it. Fortunately, the facility that I use is part of a larger facility in Whirlyball. For those who don't know what Whirlyball is, check it out. It's amazing. But the facility always has people there, so that's one thing that's really nice. But particularly with like female students, with children, I never, ever leave myself alone. And there's been times in the past that's legitimately saved me, because I had somebody accuse me of some stuff years ago when I was in my 20s. And I could point to the fact that I had never, ever been alone with a student, because this has been my policy going back for a long time. I have never put myself in a position where this could ever be questioned. And what it was stated was the person made a claim that I made them feel uncomfortable. And I said, I would like to know what that looks like, because I don't know. And so I asked the instructor. They said they didn't want to elaborate. I said, that's fine. But I did point out I had never, ever put myself in a position where I could ever be questioned, and I could never be in a position where I was ever alone with somebody. And it's important that we take measures like that to protect ourselves as well. Also, it's a good policy anyway, and it makes your students feel better to know that you consider this important enough to have a policy like that in place, and hold your instructors to it as well. Like, if you have instructors working under you, you need to make sure that they have the same thing, where you let them know you're not allowed to be alone with a student, particularly a female or a child student, but there needs to be at least a couple people here when you're doing sessions. Now, I understand like private sessions are going to take place. It's an important part of training sometimes. But you need to maybe have a third person there. You maybe need to have something in there to set as some sort of a method of making sure that they feel safe and so that you feel safe, so that you can't let this stuff ever come into question. And so that's my policy, and I highly recommend it. If you have parents, keep them involved. Let them be part of things. You want them involved anyway. Don't let them just drop off their kids and leave. And tell them, I want you to be here to watch what's going on. I want you to be involved in tournaments and come to tournaments. I want you to be involved in everything that goes on so that you're never caught by surprise. Have them involved in as much as you can. Now, you can't make them do it. Some parents don't want to be involved. But you need to try to keep them involved, because it's a way of, once again, it's putting a boundary in place to make sure that not just you, but your instructors are doing the right things and that things don't get called into question. If you are very clear about the fact, like, look, I've been trying to keep as many parents involved as possible. I never put myself in an inappropriate position. I always act professionally. That is how you keep yourself safe. And that is how you prevent accusations, because you don't give them a reason to accuse you of anything, because you act like the responsible instructor that they believe you are. And that's really what it boils down to. Be the person that they want you to be, this responsible leader in the school. So that's really the gist of this. I'd love to get your feedback on this as well. This has already been kind of a long video. But I want, as a community, for us to start talking about this more, because in martial arts, this has become very, very prevalent. This is a problem that we need to address. And I hope that you share this, not because I'm trying to get a bunch of views on YouTube, but because this is an important conversation to have. And I hope that you guys think so too. Thanks for watching, guys.